So it's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker tonight. So Becky Parker. Becky currently lives with her husband in Penticton, British Columbia, but was raised as a seventh generation on a mixed livestock farm outside of Guelph, Ontario. So you're kind of back home now, so welcome. After attending the University of Guelph for a Bachelor of Applied Science, she pursued a teaching degree. In 2012, Becky received her Master's of Education, where her major project identified experiential ways to teach about food, agriculture, and the environment. In 2015, Becky was awarded the Nuffield Scholarship. Her research is focused on models of agriculture, career education, and the collaborative relationships between industry groups, youth development organizations, and the formal school systems. Becky is here to share some stories from her Nuffield travels and describe some ways to promote agriculture careers to the Generation Z. Please welcome, join me in welcoming Becky Parker to the stage.
Thank you, Mark. So I was recently at a conference where I was asked to describe myself in 6 words. The bio I provided was foodie, traveler, advocate, educator, Nuffield Scholar. So those of you that know me probably might have been able to guess at some of those words, because I'm incredibly passionate about agriculture, I'm incredibly passionate about education, and I'm incredibly passionate about agriculture careers. I've been blessed with the opportunity to travel the world as a Nuffield Scholar and to research all of those topics as I made those many miles across the globe. And I'm honored tonight to have the opportunity to be here and share some of those stories with you. Now, I could literally talk for hours about this, but I recognize that we all have to get home, so I promise I will not talk for hours. I'm going to give you the TED Talk version of my Nuffield Scholarship, and this is in preparation for November when I have to cut this down to about 10 minutes. So bear with me. For about the next 25 minutes, I am going to share with you some ways that I think we can collaborate to encourage Generation Z to pursue careers in agriculture. So what do you want to be when you grow up? It's a question that we ask young people a lot. It's a question I ask myself sometimes still, and some of you might do the same. When you ask that question to young people, you can get any number of answers. Some are ambitious and might want to be something like a pro athlete, or maybe a doctor. Others might look to somebody in their everyday life and aspire to be a teacher. And then there's a whole group of them that just have absolutely no idea. It's not working there. Now, how many of those students do you think would answer that question with a career like agronomist, or food scientist, heavy equipment mechanic, or farmer? The answer is not enough. We have a labor shortage in agriculture, and the biggest gap is in primary production. The Canadian Agriculture Human Resource Council has projected that we currently have 59,000 jobs that are vacant in agriculture. And that currently costs the sector $1.5 billion in lost sales. And in fact, they also found that 17% of producers have either canceled or delayed their expansion plans because of those vacancies. And on the horizon, that issue is still there. It's expected to grow to 114,000. That's almost the population of Guelph. And that is just in primary production. It doesn't even take into account those other areas of agriculture and food, like research or those food scientists. So clearly this issue is something that is affecting both the productivity and the profitability of our sector. Farm Credit Canada has identified the labor shortage as one of the leading business risk management issues facing agriculture in Canada. Now, it's easy to get discouraged and it's very easy to complain, and Trust me, I've watched my father for the last 30 years as a farmer complain about things like the weather that don't change. Complaining doesn't increase the price of beef either. And complaining is certainly not going to make a workforce magically appear. So I'm not going to spend my time today talking about the issue. I'm going to spend my time today talking about the solution. Instead of looking at the horizon and seeing a challenge that gets closer and closer, we need to look at the horizon and set a vision. So according to Andy Stanley, a vision is a mental picture of what could be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. A vision is a preferred future. My vision, my preferred future, is an agriculture career as a top choice for Generation Z. I believe that if we can engage youth to pursue a career in agriculture, we can get to a point where we have far fewer of those vacancies because we'll have a workforce which is ready, willing, and excited to work in the sector. So why students and youth as the target? Why Generation Z? We talked about millennials here, and those can be included in that, but Generation Z is what I would like to focus on today. There are several programs and initiatives that are currently underway that look at the role that foreign workers can play in filling some of those vacancies, or perhaps people that are coming into agriculture from a second career. Those are important initiatives and important demographics to target. But I want you to think for a second about that number that I showed you a few slides ago. That 114,000 vacancies by 2025. 2025 is less than 10 years away. Ask yourself, who is going to be entering the workforce in the next 10 years? It's going to be Generation Z. Now, that's loosely defined as people born mid-90s to about 2009, 2010. So there is some overlap with that millennial group. The majority of Gen Z is sitting in elementary and secondary classrooms across this country. They're the ones who are currently making their decisions about which career path they are going to take. And they are a huge, huge chunk of the population. According to the 2011 census, 22% of the Canadian population is in Generation Z. They're 22% of our population, but they are 100% of our future. If we have a total of 7.3 million Gen Z across Canada, we only need to convince 1.5% of them to pursue a career in agriculture, and we will fill that gap of 114,000. Youth in Gen Z are entrepreneurial. They are multitaskers, and they are addicted to technology. According to a study by Cisco, they actually put technology in the same category as water and air. They really like their iPhones. And while that might scare some of you, and Gen Z's so different and so new and crazy technology, I think that we have to target them with these messages about agriculture and food and the career opportunities. And we have to do it collaboratively. There has to be collaborations between multiple stakeholders. So as Mark said, my Nuffield research topic is collaborative models of agriculture career education. And I'm looking at the roles that all of these different groups up here on this slide can play. I've spent the last 18 months traveling the world asking, what are the roles of the agri-food industry? What are the roles of the formal school system? What are the roles of youth development groups like 4-H? And how can they work together? And when they do work together, which models make the biggest impact on those career choices? Now, my findings are not radical, my findings are not revolutionary, but I do believe that they are realistic. There are models which exist that we can rip off and duplicate, and that we can use here to make sure that we have that Generation Z eager and willing to work in our sector. So I'm going to share with you 3 ways that I think we can help. I want you to open their minds, open your doors, and open your heart. So what the heck does that mean? opening your minds, opening their minds. The reality is, as we heard today, many people do not know that there are career opportunities in agriculture. So that first step has to be to address that. That first step has to be awareness. We need to open Gen Z's minds to the opportunities in agriculture and food. So what does that look like? Some of you might have heard this story before. I'm quite passionate about this idea. But when I was down in New Zealand last year, I had the opportunity to see what was called a Get Ahead Day. And it was actually facilitated by the New Zealand Young Farmers Association, which was an incredibly dynamic group of people that are not unlike OAFI in their facilitation role of these types of initiatives. So this event really stood out to me because of the collaborations that it had between those New Zealand Young Farmers Association with the agri-food industry and then the collaboration of the schools as well. So I was in this little town called Palmerston North on the North Island of New Zealand, and showed up to this community center in the morning and walk into typical community center, and around it there was several stations being set up by different people in agriculture businesses. Anything from financial institutions to fertilizer companies to commodity groups. And they set up these stations with small, hands-on activities that the students could do that would introduce them to a career in agriculture. So at about 10 o'clock, I remember the buses arrived and the students started coming up the stairs, and the facilitators did the smartest thing that you can ever do with a group of youth, and that was to feed them. That got their attention, got them to sit down and listen to what was going to happen for the rest of the day. They were broken into groups that included members from different schools. So they weren't only with their peers that they knew, they were with people that they might not have ever met before. And they were told that they were going to go through these different stations, rotate through. They would be introduced to the person representing the agriculture business, hear a little bit about their career, and then complete an activity that related to that career. And they were going to be judged on not only their technical skills and how well they completed that activity, but how well did they exhibit employability skills. Things like communication and teamwork and critical thinking. Those pieces that we sometimes maybe don't value as much as those technical skills when we're thinking about career education, but they were going to be judged on really that combination that we look for in any employee. Somebody that can contribute to the team and be successful at what they do. And when they're judged, they weren't going to be given points. They were going to get a check for some dollars. They could earn up to $25 at each station. And I thought that this was such a brilliant concept, so simple but so brilliant, because by giving them a check instead of just meaningless points, it was equating that career with actually earning a living, with a job that you can do to earn money, and equating that agriculture with the economy. At the end of the day, the team that had the most points or the most dollars would win, and they had some prizes that were provided by those industry groups. So I linked up with a group and I watched them rotate through these stations. And they did everything from do a cash flow projection for farming. They did an activity where they had to make management decisions about a sheep farm. They graded meat. They actually gave them chunks of meat that they had to grade using their system. And they learned so much. They had their minds opened to the possibilities which exist in agriculture, to all of those different career opportunities. And many of these students were from an urban background. They hadn't really thought of anything outside of farming as an opportunity that they could pursue. So I really feel that these types of competitions are what we need to do to open minds to the opportunities which exist in agriculture for careers. And competitions, I think, are so key because what do you see when you turn on the television these days? Chopped is a competition. Dancing with the Stars is a competition. This is something that young people, that Generation Z understand. and it gets them to really put forward that entrepreneurial, that business spirit, and compete to actually continue to learn. So I'm excited to announce that we're bringing this idea here to Canada, and in partnerships with agcareers.com and Canada's Outdoor Farm Show, we're going to be launching this and doing a pilot of this program this fall at Canada's Outdoor Farm Show. But it's only going to work if we have that collaboration. That's what I really want everybody to understand, is that we need that support from the education system. We need that support from the agri-food sector, and we need those facilitation roles and that focus on both technical as well as employability skills. So I'm excited for that, and stay tuned. It means a lot to me that we're bringing this idea and I get to actually see something come to fruition from my Nuffield Scholarship. So once we've opened their minds, the next thing that we need to do is for you to open your doors. And I really want to thank Liz for making this point earlier, and I'm going to hammer it into you again. But if that first step is awareness, that second opportunity has to be engagement. So I need you to open your doors. So you're going to go to work now. If you think about how we usually traditionally educate about careers, what do? You get a job description. You have to read a job description and kind of decipher, okay, is this something that I might want to do? Not dissimilar to what Faith was sharing earlier about reading it in a textbook. I don't think that's the most effective way. I think that we need to give students that experience, that opportunity to try out a job. So I'm going to give you a chance to experience being an aerial vehicle engineer. I'm going to ask you to make a paper airplane. On your tables is a stack of paper. Lovely letterhead that I think we've had around the office for quite a few years, so we're going to put it to some good use. So you can begin now. I have some best practices up here for you to follow along if it's been a while, or maybe if you've never made a paper airplane, because if we think about a student coming into a job shadow opportunity or co-op opportunity, they need that instruction. So please feel free to use those and follow along, but I'm going to only give you about 30 seconds, so you're going to have to work quickly. This is a quick learning experience. You might want to look over your shoulder to your colleagues that are around the room and see if they have any tips that you can follow. And just a heads up, we will be test flying these. I suggest crisp folds. That's a good best practice. Don't stress too much. This is a learning experience. 4-H, learn to do by doing, right? This is in your job duties. As an aerial vehicle engineer, you have to oversee the design and construction of these aerial vehicles. All right, I'm going to give you about 10 more seconds. And then we're going to do that second bullet point in your job description, which is to facilitate those test flights. All right? So what's going to happen is on the count of 3, I'm going to have everybody stand up. You can all stand up now. And on the count of 3, we are going to facilitate our test flight. And please aim them this way, because Colleen said I'm the only one that can lose an eye in this whole demonstration. We have, I guess, some sort of coverage for me, I'm not sure, but are we ready? 1, 2, 3. I told you, we have insurance, it's okay, it's okay. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Those are great. get you up and off your feet so that you could pay attention a little bit to the second half of my presentation. This was really to illustrate that point, that you now know, after completing that simple experiential activity, whether you were utterly frustrated thinking, Becky, why in God's name are you getting us to make a paper airplane right now? Or whether you were like, hey, this is kind of cool, I'm into this, at least give it a shot. And it really kind of illustrates that if we give students, if we give Gen Z that opportunity to try out a career, they have pretty much immediate feedback as to whether that is something that they have no interest in, or if it's something that really turns their gears and is getting them excited about that opportunity. So we've talked a lot about experiential education, and I saw an amazing example of this right here in Canada. In March, at the same conference that I met Cameron at, I also met a teacher named Kathy Price, who teaches in Alberta in Golden Hills School District, which is about an hour north of Calgary. And she invited me to come to her school and see her Career Connections program, which is where she actually gives students the opportunity to go off of the school grounds and learn and connect with those community partners. Now, it is a small school district, and Kathy joked with me that she actually has more community partners than she has students. And they have a pretty amazing website that lists all of those community partners. Now, it might be a small school district, but their numbers are pretty impressive. 55% of their students are engaged in off-campus learning. And in the one school I visited, they have a 98% graduation rate. Last year, 12 of their 38 students in one school were in a registered apprenticeship program. So they walk the talk when it comes to those experiential learning opportunities. And I actually had the chance to meet a student who was in one of those registered apprenticeship programs. And that's the young man who's up on the screen right there. His name is Stanley Friesian. So I was kind of taxied all around the Golden Hills School District, and we ended up at the Linden Agri Center one afternoon. And I met Stanley, and he's about 4 feet tall and has a smile about 4 feet wide. He's a grade 10 student that moved from Belize with his family in grade 5, and he's now currently in grade 10. And I asked him, how did you end up here? What was the registered apprenticeship program? Why did that excite you? And he said he had seen his peers do this Career Connections program. And he said, they all got jobs. They're all earning money now. And it's true. At Linden Agri Center, I met at least half a dozen young people who had done an apprenticeship program there during high school and were now working full-time, employed by that company, because they had the chance to try it out. He did a job shadow at the parts desk and realized that he loved the mix of being able to interact with the customers and then also being able to go behind the desk and tinker with the parts and actually work with his hands. He loved that mix of it. And he is now in that registered apprenticeship program for a parts technician, earning hours towards his trade. So I think that this is such an excellent example of how we need to open our doors. Those community partners are such a key part of it. Now, Einstein once said that the only true source of knowledge is experience. And I think when we open students' minds, we give them that knowledge. We put those dots on the map. But when you open your doors, that's when you give them that experience. That is when they are going to connect the dots. So I'm asking you, as the agri-food sector, to open your doors, to open the doors of your offices, open the doors of your tractors, open the doors of your research labs, because we have to let those students in so that they can have a chance to try those careers. And the last thing I'm going to ask you to do is open your heart. So that might sound a little gushy for some of us in the room, but what I mean is that awareness and experience are key, but you can never underestimate that personal connection, that value of a personal influence. So once we've opened students' minds to the possibilities of agriculture, we need to give them the chance to try those out. And then the ones that are engaged, the ones that are showing that interest, we need to hook them through some mentorship opportunities. Now, Food and Beverage Ontario recently surveyed 1,200 people for their career study. And they found that when people were asked what's the best way to learn about a career, 79% of them said from somebody who works in the industry. So mentorship and ambassador has to be something that we do. Opening your hearts and giving a real life example of someone working in the industry is giving those students that next step. And I saw an amazing organization in Australia called the Young Farming Champions. I had lunch with Lynn Strong, who is the founder of Art for Agriculture that runs the Young Farming Champions. And these are exactly what they say they are. They are young, they are farmers, and they are indeed champions. They receive incredible amounts of media training so that they are prepared to stand up in front of a public audience and deliver their message about the food and fiber sector, as they call it in Australia, and to share their information with the public. But then they also go into classrooms and they talk about why they are passionate about the agriculture and food sector. And because they have that media training and because they're young, they make an impact, and those students actually are paying attention to what they have to say. They can mentor those young people and talk about the pathways that they can take to pursue a career in agriculture. This is what we need to do. You need to open your hearts and you need to share your story about why it is that you love working in agriculture. Because almost everybody that I have met in agriculture has such a passion for it. I think that we all love what we do. We know that there's a feeling to working in agriculture. We know that there is an identity to working in agriculture. And that's what we really have to share with that next generation. So the first thing I want to share with you here is a story that I read a book recently by a gentleman named Carmine Gallo, who actually is heavily involved in TED Talks. And he talked about how you get people to find their passion. He shared a story about a conversation that he had with a gentleman who works in agribusiness. So his first question to the gentleman was, "What do you do?" And the answer was, "I'm the CEO of the California Strawberry Growers." His second question was, "Well, what are you passionate about?" And the gentleman said, "Well, I'm passionate about promoting California strawberries." So his third question was, "What is it about the industry that makes your heart sing?" And the gentleman sat there and thought, and he answered with, "It's the American dream." He said, "My parents were immigrants and they worked in the field, and they eventually were able to buy an acre of land, and they were able to work it and grow it from there." He said, "With strawberries, you don't need a lot of land, and it's a stepping stone to the American dream." Now, how inspiring is that third answer? I think that we all need to ask ourselves that question. We all need to ask ourselves, what is it about working in agriculture that makes your heart sing? And that's what you need to share with others. You need to use your inspiration to inspire others. That is how we will reach our vision. Remember, a vision is a mental picture of what could be, fueled by the conviction that it should be. So what could be is an agriculture career as a top choice for Generation Z. Why should it be? Because 60% of Generation Z wants to change the world. And what better place is there to do that than a career in agriculture? All you have to do is open their minds, open your doors, and open your hearts. Thank you.